Oh, yeah. Let him hear it. Yes, that's right. You know what time it is. When you hear the howl, you know what time it is. It's Mindful Warrior time. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mindful Warrior. I believe this is episode number 19. Today is February 1st. I'm one of your hosts, Nate Jackson. With me is Eben Britton and Gerard Bauer, and of course, Gandalf the Grey. What's up, Eben? How you doing, man?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
Real good, real good. Jed, you good?
I am good, too.
Yeah, we got Jed on the mic today. We don't have a guest.
Ow!
We've got us. Just going to take on a couple topics today. Tribalism in America, specifically how it relates to sports fandom and what we went through as athletes. And then on the back end of this episode, we're also going to talk about successful stoners through time. It has always been conceived or thought of conventionally that people who use cannabis are losers and can't be good at anything. Well, we're going to dispel some of those rumors later, talking about our own experience with the plant and then some other successful individuals who also have used cannabis and been part of their excellence. But first, we want to start off because it is Super Bowl week. Not like, our listeners really care much about that, but there are some interesting elements that are near and dear to us as far as belonging to a team and stuff like that. Eb, are you going to watch the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, where at?
I'll be at home.
Cool.
Going to have some family over, maybe a few friends, cook up some good food, and dive into the game, huh? Like a good old-fashioned American family.
Well, look, do you care?
But here's what I'm excited about. Let me tell you why I'm going to watch it. For fun, first of all, but second of all, my old buddy from Arizona, Nick Foles, he's playing in the game.
Oh, wow, that's your buddy.
Yeah, man. I mean, we were teammates at Arizona. He was a little bit younger than me. Came into the league later. Has had some success. Really interesting media twist on Nick's story. He had some great success early on in his career in Philly. Was in a really baffling move traded to the Rams for Sam Bradford by Chip Kelly, who the year before they'd had great success together. I mean, they were smoking teams, putting up great numbers offensively. He was having a career year essentially, and the next year they decided he wasn't quite the right fit. Traded him to St. Louis, and his career sort of took a turn to, it gets confusing. You're learning different playbooks, you're around different people, the chemistry is different. Anything can affect the level of play for any individual when those transitions start to take place. He bounced around, was a backup in St. Louis, and then made his way to Kansas City, and then back. Now he's back in Philly. Carson Wentz, their prized young quarterback, first rounder, who's been just balling, gets hurt really late in the year. Everybody's down on the Eagles because now Nick has to step in. Nick, the unproven guy who hasn't had any success as far as...
Oh, the Eagles are done. The Eagles are done.
As far as...
Carson Wentz is on injured reserve. The Eagles are done. You can pack it up and call it a day.
As far as our media is concerned, Nick can't throw the long ball is what they were saying in the game against Minnesota. They're really going to miss the long ball, with Carson being down. Nick can't really do that. And there he is throwing 30, 40, 50-yard bombs for touchdowns in the game in a handily beaten win.
Yeah, one of the better
Vikings.
Defenses, too, against one of that.
Yeah.
And the Eagles, I think they've got a great D. I think they're always exciting. And, of course, the Pats. We've got the Pats again.
Yeah, we got the Pats to hate and
the Empire.
Yeah, to root for them to lose.
We've got the evil Empire,
What you were just describing as far as Nick Foles' journey from team to team to team kind of paints the disconnect between players and fans in the NFL. We all saw that happen. Guys get shuffled around from team to team to the point where when you're on a team, you care less about the fate of that team sometimes than the fans do.
Right.
The fans, for example, the NFC Championship game between the Eagles and the Vikings was tribalism at its best in America, and there were a lot of fights at the stadium. And Minnesota Vikings fans who had traveled to Philadelphia to watch this game were tormented by the Philly fans, who are proudly roughneck fans.
Yeah. There's a prison under their stadium.
Is there?
There is, and I don't know if it's still functioning, but there's a jail built in under the stadium, where there was also a judge and like a whole court where people would come in that couldn't be at the game anymore because they got too rowdy, got into a fight, whatever it is they did, escorted downstairs and might spend the rest of the game in a prison cell.
I mean, those guys take it as a badge of honor. I was reading a quote from Minnesota fans, and they say they're just embracing their rough side. They said, "Nobody gave us nothing. New York is rich and sophisticated. Washington is connected and powerful. Boston is the upper crust. And what's Philly? We're cheesesteak. That's it."
Did somebody really say that? That's a fan's quote?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any Vikings quotes from Minnesota or no?
Well, no, the Minnesota is Minnesota nice. That's
nice.
Minnesota nice. You know, they are big on hospitality and being respectful, and of course, those fans went into Philly and were pissed upon and spilled beer and fights and stuff like that. But
oh no.
And the worst part for them is that now they're hosting the Super Bowl, and they're hosting all those Philly fans in Minnesota now who've come to, stay in their hotels, eat at their restaurants, drink their alcohol, and piss in their streets. And so
I think they might be in for a bit of a surprise because Minnesota is really, really cold.
Yeah.
Like, it's cold beyond I'm sure you played in some cold weather, but I mean, they have tunnels in the city. They have skyways and tunnels, so you don't have to go outside. Yeah. Like, it's a level of cold that even I can barely comprehend. I was only there for a few days once in the winter. And it's awful. So,
So
maybe it'll be humbling for the Philly fans.
Yeah, but it's the collision of different tribes, coming into that city, and everyone knows about the Boston Patriots tribes.
Right.
Those are kind of tiring. People are ready to see them get supplanted, I think.
Absolutely.
Pats, Tommy, we got Robbie. Of course, you got Billy Belichick running the whole show. They're unbeatable. It's been a beautiful situation there with them. God bless them.
Exactly. I typically don't root for people to lose, but I would like to watch them lose. I think the Empire should crumble. I think Tom Brady's whole Tom versus time thing that he's trying to do, like play till he's 50, I actually think it's bad for the league. I think it's bad for everyone else around him to protect him like that. The older he gets, the more fragile he is, and the harder it is for people to protect him. So the more guys are going to get brain damage trying to protect this guy and let him, play until he's 70 years old. I'm going to play this year too. We're going to win the Super Bowl,
He's still dropping dimes.
No, I'm hating a little bit on the system that's set up for him to be the hero. Obviously, I take nothing away from his accomplishments. He works very hard. He's obsessive about it, and he deserves all the success he has. But I do think the system is stacked. But I want to talk about our own experiences.
Let's dive into this idea of tribalism in football.
Yeah,
and I think really, the more interviews I do, the more conversations I have with people about my career in football, my experience in football, from high school to the NFL, the things that I'm always coming back to are the locker room, the relationships with the guys, with my teammates. Like, that's the stuff that really sticks out to me. That's the component of the game, of the sport, that team atmosphere, that tribe of individuals all on this path to, whatever it is, to win a championship, to win one game a week, to be successful in this, vein of football. I'm always coming back to that, and that sense of, purpose, that sense of meaning in my life and what I was doing. That was really the biggest part of it, I think, looking back. It wasn't the wins. It wasn't the losses. I was doing this interview the other day, and somebody asked, tell us about, some of the great wins or experiences you had on some of the football teams you played on, or especially, with the Jaguars. And I was like, well, there were a couple games that I could think of that were real highlights of my career, that were really exciting wins or just great team victories, great team experiences. But the thing I realized that I come back to all the time is those relationships and that setting, coming into that tribe and being an integral part of the functionality of that system.
I agree. I didn't play football until I was in high school, and I was on soccer teams. I was on swim teams. I felt that sense of connectedness and tribalism in those settings. But it wasn't until I got on a football field where it really kind of cemented, because it's like, you got to trust the guys around you, and they have to be able to trust you. Yeah. You're going through something that's violent.
Yeah.
That is painful.
Yeah.
And there's a large group of guys, and it's like this journey is not just on the field; it's in the locker room as well. It's in your traveling. Even when you're at school, your teammates, you have a connection with them. You see them in the halls.
Yeah.
On Fridays before the games, we would wear our jerseys to school.
Yeah, we did that
so
too.
we all had our jerseys on, and we could see each other around around school and in the quad and stuff like that.
Representing.
Yeah, and so sports teams have that effect, and it's one of the things that when I was done with my NFL career, I felt that void.
Yeah.
I felt that emptiness of not having that sense of connectedness, that sense of brotherhood and camaraderie, and also pulling my weight in a way that made me feel good about myself.
Right.
Like when you go into work every day and your locker's still there, it means you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And everyone in that room knows that. Everyone knows if you're doing well or not, and if they are as well. And so the guys who stick around on the team, man, you feel a sense of like mutual respect for one another.
Yeah.
And
it's very honorable.
It's very honorable.
You're contributing, you're producing, you're putting all of your energy into creating something, producing on the field, essentially, is what it manifests in as football players.
Right.
Now, for me, as an offensive lineman, making a block, just play after play, just making that one block, doing my job and seeing how that fed the rest of the team, the rest of the play. That's incredibly energizing, it's inspiring, it's connecting to something greater, right? I mean, it's a profound experience.
Now, do you guys think that after having said all that football is probably the greatest team game for that reason? Or would you just say that those circumstances strengthen the team bonds because they're much more intricate than other sports would be?
Part of the philosophy has always been football is the ultimate team game.
Yeah.
You have 11 guys on the field, 22 guys on the field, 11 on 11. And it's literally like one guy makes a mistake and a whole play gets fucked up.
Right.
You need 11 guys operating, at 100% on the same page every single play.
Yeah. And they all have different jobs, which is what makes it kind of like a community that's, working together. Right. You get in the huddle for offensive players. You get in the huddle, you're told what the play is, and everyone is thinking something else, something different. Everyone has a different spot to line up in, a different man to block, or a different space to run to, or whatever. So everyone is independent of each other, but working together. And I feel like that's like a community in a lot of ways. Like,
definitely.
If one
it's a family even.
Yeah, if one person doesn't, go fetch the water at the well, then we all go thirsty type of thing. Or if one person is standing watch at night and falls asleep and the village gets raided, then we all die. So we all have a job that's integral to the survival of our team, and if one guy falls off, then everybody dies. And so you feel that sense of responsibility for your brother. This is one thing we hear all the time. Don't do it for yourself, do it for the guy next to you.
Yeah.
Because he is going to do it for you. And that is a beautiful thing about football, and it's also a dangerous thing about football, because the tribalism is exploited by corporate interests, and then I will sacrifice my life to make this play, so that we can win this game or whatever, and then maybe the next week I get cut.
Right.
You know, and so the loyalty that would normally exist when I just sacrificed my life in front of my tribe does not exist in corporate sports.
Right.
And so it's easy for guys to get cast off, and that's what makes it so confusing after the fact, is because you're like, what I went through was real. I felt that was real, and then I wasn't treated afterwards as if it was by those who control my fate. Now, the teammates that we have, will always be friends with them. Yeah. Like Kyle Turley was in here last month, and he was talking about, you know, he knows even the guys that he hated, he could count on them right now, you know, if he needed to. And that is the case. There is a mutual connection. But the brotherhood. That brotherhood exists, but it's weird because, you know, if it weren't for this podcast and what we're doing with Athletes for Care, we wouldn't even see any of those brothers anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, dude, just don't want to interrupt you and
no, go ahead.
And bring you back to the original question a little bit. Like, why is it better than basketball? Why are the bonds and the brotherhood better than basketball, hockey, soccer?
I don't know about the bonds, but I know that in most of those games, individuals can take over entire competitions. You know, you've got LeBron James, you know, you've got every team in the NBA has like their star who can really take them over the edge, that can take control of an entire game. And I think there's less of that interaction. I'm sure there's a feeling of team bond, of tribal responsibility in those other sports, but I think the difference is that in football, it's really about 11 guys working together on every play to move the ball down the field and score points. And otherwise, the breakdowns, you really see those breakdowns happening as guys, you know, aren't fulfilling those responsibilities and aren't you know, making the plays that they need to make a play successful.
I think the physicality of it also contributes to that feeling that's the ultimate team sport, because it's literally gaining of territory or protecting of territory. So it's like militaristic in that we're marching forward, trying to gain their territory, and doing so with hand-to-hand combat, you know, flying fists and helmets. And you see a lot of your brothers get injured and get pulled off the field, and then it's like next man up, you know? And we have numbers on our backs, and up until pros, we don't have our names on our backs, and we have a helmet, and we're largely anonymous, you know? One guy goes down, the next guy's got to go in there, and then you learn that everybody can be counted on. And
I think there's also, because of the violent nature of the game, there's always this like us versus them mentality being created, this relationship being created. All week you're watching film, you're preparing for your opponent. It's a very separateness is created, you know. We need to do what we need to do to beat them, you know. It's always about us versus them, and that's really instilled, you know, throughout. It's you're either going into this game to kick somebody's ass or you're going to get your ass kicked, you know, is the mentality that is cultivated all week preparing for that game on Sundays.
Well, I can back you guys up with a little science on this subject here.
Hit us.
Because, you know, psychologists and scientists like to break things down, and they have these 5 elements of a social unit or a team.
Nice.
And one is, so, you know, in regards to football, common motives and goals. That's very straightforward. With any sport, everybody wants to win.
Yep.
An established division of labor, which is very different in football because it's very established. Like, the center is not going to ever score a touchdown, most likely.
Right.
You know, and the quarterback's got to throw the ball. He's not going to do a whole lot of blocking.
Right.
And that's like you guys said, not in a lot of sports. The division of labor is not that strong. Like, you even in basketball, it's like a role player is a guy who actually has a very specific role besides dribbling, scoring, and defense.
Right.
So that's, you know, that's the exception, not the rule. Established status, which obviously you guys have a ton of coaches. You guys have, you know,
a hierarchy,
a serious hierarchy. And then these other two, this last one and last two, the accepted norms and values with reference to matters relevant of the group. and development of accepted sanctions, which is basically your group morality, like not talking, on the offensive line, people don't like to talk to other people outside of the group of the team, little rules like that. And you guys have your little, what would you call them? Rituals, ethics, and morals within the team. But I think the established roles, the strict rules and hierarchy in football do make it a strong team sport compared to other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, another thing to point out that's key to this whole thing is how important tribalism, or the sense of community and oneness, how important that is to the human existence, the human condition, like how we function in our lives. And I think that's why football and sports in general are so popular, so magnetic for people to dive into, because it gives them something to root for. It gives us a sense of belonging, a sense of oneness, and we see it in every aspect of our culture. You see it with food, how people eat. You've got people with different philosophies on how to do that.
And you think that's a tribal thing?
I think it's a mechanism of that urge, that need to be part of a tribe. You've got people form groups all the time. There's Facebook groups. There's, groups of people gathering together to argue common points or, common ideas and philosophies against others.
Happening on the internet.
On the internet.
Which brings up a whole other debate as to whether or not these actually can constitute tribes that have the same kind of fulfilling nature as the ones that we have been involved in, or tribes like, Indian tribes that used to be here, the Native Americans.
Right.
Those are real tribes, And so these kind of new modern tribes, does that scratch the itch for us? And I say no. I mean, the sense of connectedness is lost, which is why you get people so riled up about sporting events.
Well, it's because we're connecting on these sort of superficial levels, these superficial planes, without the underlying rituals and spiritual connectedness that those, more indigenous tribes, tribal cultures, tribal communities, are all held together by that underlying
by survival, really. I mean, because the idea of rooting for a team is there's no real, nothing that's rooted in our survival and our health. There's nothing there that's necessary.
Right. There's
it's playtime. It's play tribe.
However, when you're on the field, there is something that is at stake, and it's your physical health and well-being. You're under attack by other people, and so you feel that. And I was reading, scientifically, the spectator, when he's watching, or he or she is watching sports, it feels as if they're actually playing it. There's that actual physiology in the brain that's making them think, I'm on the field. And so that's why they might feel so riled up by the events and so passionate about it if it goes wrong. People get really, really pissed off if their teams lose.
Yeah. Now, as a player, you guys went to multiple teams. So you're in one tribe and you go to the other. What's the mental process? Is it a snap? Is it just like, oh, here's a new group of guys I'm on their team now? Or is there residual loyalty?
Well, it was something.
How does it feel?
Talking about Nick Foles' journey, that I thought was interesting that you touched on, Nate, was that as a player, when you're traveling from team to team, you're transitioning from team to team, the overall success of that team you find yourself on is less important to you as a player than it is to the fans.
Yeah.
And it really becomes this very, that separateness starts to happen as a player, I believe.
Yeah, especially as you get older and you start to kind of read between the lines and you see all those guys that disappear. You have a buddy, a good friend on the team, his locker's next to you. You come in one day, his locker's gone, and you never see him again. That happened to me a lot. I mean, guys who I was buddies with, never see him again. And I had a kind of a unique experience with this because I grew up a big 49er fan. I was a Bay Area kid. All my friends were 49er fans. That was our tribe. And then I ended up getting signed to the Niners out of college. And so what before was my, mythical tribe became my actual tribe. And it changed. It changed the way I thought about a lot of this stuff, because all of a sudden it was no longer, I was no longer enamored with the San Francisco 49er logo and the team colors and the Joe Montana, Jerry Rice lore. Now I was part of this thing where I had to pull my weight, and it had nothing to do with my idols. It had to do with my performance on a daily basis, keeping my job. And then I was traded to the Broncos with a tap on the shoulder. Okay, so now I know that there's no loyalty to my tribe because of the way I feel about it. Yeah. So I get sent to Denver and spent 6 years there, and that's where I really felt a part of that team tribe. And I spent 6 years there, and then that was, fractured when our head coach was fired and they brought in a new head coach. And all along the way, I saw guys disappear and never heard from them again. And then I got sent to the Browns for a week. And it was a weird feeling because I was sent to a city that I didn't know anybody and didn't have any affiliations with the team and had preconceived notions about what that city and that team was like. And I felt like a stranger in that locker room. I was only there for a week, not long enough to feel a part of it at all. And I think there's a disconnect there with a lot of athletes these days.
Yeah.
Especially the ones like Nick Foles who get shuffled around. I mean, I guess he probably does have a soft spot for Philly because that's where he had his success at first, but he probably has no illusions about the cutthroat nature of the league.
At this stage, I don't think so.
No.
But I think you can allow yourself to fall back under that illusion. That happened for me when from Jacksonville to Chicago. It had been a tumultuous end there in Jacksonville, and I was really ready to be about done. I mean, I wasn't necessarily itching to get back to football, and through a lot of meditation and talking with people around me, I was sort of convinced that maybe I'd find my love for the game again somewhere else. So I gave it a shot, went and worked out for a couple teams, worked out for the Seahawks, flew back to Jacksonville. They didn't sign me. A few days later, flew out to Chicago, worked out for them, and they loved me and wanted to sign me that day. And slowly but surely, that sense of belonging began to grow. And I found myself, back in love with it under the illusion of, this tribal atmosphere. And I think a big part of what these teams are, a big tool that they use, that they wield, is that tribal essence. From the movie North Dallas 40, John Matuzak has this amazing line at the end to one of his coaches because they've just lost, the title game, whatever it was, against their division rival. And the guy's screaming at his coach. He's like, every time I call it a family, you call it a business. And every time I call it a business, you call it a family. And that's really, what it boils down to at the end of the day, business-wise, of what's happening in the NFL. They love to wield this veil over you saying, this is a family atmosphere. We're all in this together. We all love each other. And then the next thing you know, you're fucking getting your ass kicked out the door, with no looking back, no entry point back in, and that's it,
And on the other side of that coin, you're in meetings and they're talking about, hey, this is the business, guys.
Right.
This is how it is. And then you go out and you turn on the TV and the media is saying, these guys are playing a game for a living, know? Shut up and play.
Yeah.
Take it.
Yeah.
Take it. And that hypnotizing effect of being called up and being signed to a team, that'll make you positive. That'll make you feel like hopeful that all the stuff that you went through before, it was just bumps in the road, preparing you for this ultimate kind of fulfillment of this dream. It's going to come together. Because I was optimistic when I went to Cleveland, even though my body was falling apart and my hamstring was about to pop off for good. I was fucking dying inside, but I was like, I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. When an NFL coach calls you and says they want you,
That's a good feeling as a player.
It is, because you've earned that.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not, how it ends up, you've earned that to be told that you belong there, and it's intoxicating. And that's one of the things that we were talking about yesterday, Eben, is the idolatry that goes along with it. The people telling you how great you are, patting you on the back, rewarding you for your success and your behavior. That stuff is really hard to replace, and it leaves a void, even though, that may be shallow or whatever, to be buoyed by that type of shit. And even though we know it's fake after the fact, it still makes you feel good to be rewarded and to be praised, for something that a skill you've developed and spent your whole life developing.
Well, many guys, us included, you've been praised and stroked and loved and coddled and held for how great you are on the football field since you were a kid.
Yeah.
What else do you know?
Yeah.
What other way of interaction with people do you truly understand? Not much.
Right.
And if you're someone who's good, who's got the skills to pay the bills, essentially, and you keep climbing that ladder from high school into college and then find yourself in the NFL, man, that's a lot of years of positive things being thrown at you, a lot of stroking, a lot of being told how awesome you are and what a great job you're doing. So that's ingrained. That pathway that groove has been carved into your psyche of how you get through the day, of how you understand your own self-worth.
Yeah. And the reward system, if you break it down on just one football play, because really football is about one play at a time. You make a good play, you're rewarded. And if you break it down to one football play, for you, an offensive lineman, let's say it's a run play, and you smash the guy that you're supposed to smash. You physically smash that dude.
Yeah.
And you are rewarded right then and there for that. Well, where does that moment exist out in the real world?
Right.
Where does that smashable moment where I can exert my dominance and show everyone that I am a badass, and then everyone will praise me and pay me for it? Well, that's the hard thing to find.
Right.
For us, Yeah. And like you were just saying, we need to develop some other avenues for that moment earlier on.
Yeah.
We can't wait until we're done, or it's going to be hard, man. I mean, you're 2 years out, 3 years out now?
3, yeah. This will be 4. This will be my 4th season out.
I tell it took it's 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
It's like 5 years in the dark.
Yeah. 4, I'm just starting to see the light.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, what I've found, a lot of that gratification and, those feelings of positivity, really it's a feeling of fulfillment, that we're all seeking, that fills. And when that's gone, you've got this void. And a lot of that needs to come from within. For me, it's a lot about, being gentler with myself with what I accomplish in a day. I used to spend 10, 12 hours a day in just an all-out grind, watching film, lifting weights, practicing, hitting people, working on my skills and my craft as an offensive lineman, getting out onto the field. Like, my entire days were like these surges of productivity. I'd come home exhausted, totally worn out from that day, and understanding and feeling like I had done something. I had done something to make a difference in, the environment I was in, which was on a football team. I had been a productive force in that arena. And then now, to not have that, to just be a father and a husband and, to be creating this new life for myself. Sometimes a good day is spending the afternoon with my daughter, taking her to the park, taking my dog for a walk, sending out a few emails. Maybe I write a page or two, in my book. But other than that, I'm not getting that. I'm not, laying there at 7:00 at night, just totally run ragged,
right, with
that same physical and mental exhaustion that tells me that I've done what I needed to do that day to feel good.
Yeah.
I can tell you, as somebody who did not get to participate in professional sports, had quite a few office jobs, that reward it does not exist. And that's a very unfortunate part of the way normal people live.
Interesting.
Is that there is no, it's just like day in, day out, same thing, same paycheck. You don't even get paid in cash. You don't even get paid in a check, direct deposit.
Right.
No, it's just like it's just, I show up here, money shows up in my bank account over here, and maybe that money grows every year, it gets a little bit bigger. Right. But there is literally, what you're saying is, and I'll tell you, there is no
culminating.
There's no culminating moments unless you really get into something you really, really like, and you're in a direct mode. I mean, mowing your lawn is infinitely more satisfying than most office jobs.
Sure.
Because you see your lawn, it's neat and clean when you're done. You're like, that looks good. I spent an hour doing it, and look, I got something from it.
Yeah.
Most jobs just don't have it.
Like, I think that's so important.
Yeah.
You know, that's such an important key point in life to understand that.
And one of the aspects that was the most stressful about playing in the NFL might also actually have been the most rewarding, and it was at the end of every day watching on film what you've done, because you are being critiqued in real time by your superiors who are telling you whether or not you did well enough to keep your job tomorrow. Yeah. So everything you just did at work is being watched by every employee at work, all your coworkers plus your bosses, and your performance is being critiqued the day of, and you walk in the next day and you got to do it all over again, and you're being filmed again. Well,
you don't even get that. That's the thing. You get a performance review once every 6 months.
Right.
You know, honestly, the times I look more fondly upon that work is the insane days where it was a 12 to 18-hour day.
Yeah. Like
those days are way more memorable, and something about them, like you didn't want to do it every day, but it felt good, like when you got to roll in at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, because everybody was here till 1 in the morning. It's like something about it felt good. You're like, yeah, we knocked that out, man. We knocked that shit out, and so here we are. And then the rest was just like boring, you know, in comparison. But yeah, it is really unfortunate that you just don't get that wonderful, like, I did this, look at it, amazing.
Right. And
because there's a specialization. Like, there's very few people who see things through. I mean, I worked in advertising and production, so that's like there's a cycle that it goes through, but I'm only working on one part, and I'm working on the same part every day. So it's not like the ability to go from, I came up with this idea, and we sculpted it and moved it and we built it and we fixed it and we got it perfect, and here it is. It was just like, I'm here, I'm sculpting every day.
Right.
I'm resculpting, and the next day I just work on a different project, same thing.
So you're part of a team, but you don't really feel like you're part of a tribe. You don't get to go and like
watch that.
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal, the looking at the goal at the light at the end of the tunnel, is really absent, because it's just like, what is most people's goals at work? Not to get fired.
Yeah, just keep making money.
Yeah, and so the whole goal of going to work is actually the thing that makes you most unsatisfied about it.
Right.
Is like, you know, everyone's goal these days is to just live like a pretty leisurely life, to be able to press a bunch of buttons and then go home and watch the shows they want, and have security and not get challenged and not be made uncomfortable and shit like that. Yeah. But really, what we're talking about is that's the stuff that actually makes you feel alive.
Right. You need a little pushback in what you're doing, you know, to like make it feel it's anything. You know, what is it saying? If it comes easy, it's not worth it.
Right.
You know, and everybody forgets about that. And some of it's okay. Like, it's nice to have convenient access to paper towels.
Yeah.
Sure. You know, that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, for, you know, especially when you talk about food, it's like that's a big chasm we have in our lives, is like we're so disconnected from where we get our food.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like I'm getting back to earth if I'm just cooking my raw vegetables on a stove. I feel like a caveman.
Yeah,
absolutely. But you know, the fact that we don't grow it, we don't actually know where it comes from, that's like that's one of those where we need a little bit more you know, connection and pushback a little. It should be, our food should be a little bit harder to get, because that's our primary motivation in life is not to starve to death.
Right. And the disconnect these days with food is startling, man. I mean, the whole, DoorDash, Postmates generation who just basically order on their phone.
Every single meal.
And someone else goes and picks it up and brings it to you, to your door, and hands it to you. And you have no idea where that food came from, who made it, who picked it up even. And there's energy, I think, that's transferred in food. I mean, this,
absolutely.
This some weird, shady, like, triple murderer fucking out on bail comes and picks up your food and takes it in his seedy car like he's smoking meth on the way to pay, and then he just drops it off to you. I mean, is that food seeping up some of that negative energy?
Sure.
When you bring it into your home and consume it? I don't know. But there's definitely this, like, DoorDash frickin' Postmates generation, man.
Well, just about everything at this stage can be delivered to you from the touch of a button on your phone.
And some of it's okay, but alcohol, I think food is like a big one where we should not be so easily like convinced to go convenient, because it is so primal. I mean, it's what's going to happen next? Sex is going to become the same way, where it's like you have a robot, you have pornography, you have some weird device, you have some virtual reality with somebody who's not actually there, and all of a sudden we're going to disconnect from that part of our humanity, because like food is the first one, that's the most important, and then reproduction is the next. And what happens when those two things are like, we're so disconnected that we have no sense of accomplishment even?
Well, we'll find out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sex robots on the next Mindful Warrior. Right. I want to wrap this part up with one thing, because here's an actual study about team tribalism.
I love it.
That these three guys, Edmonds, Garcia, and Norilla, from Spain, examined national sporting defeats and correlated them with decreases in the value of stock. They examined 1,100 football matches in 39 countries and discovered stock markets of those countries dropped by an average of 49 points after being eliminated from the World Cup.
Wow.
That's how much we care about our sports teams.
Wow.
It's pretty fascinating.
That is fascinating.
This sense of belonging, the sense of purpose, the sense of, what we're all doing here, oneness, it's incredibly important to human life, to the human existence, to our happiness as people, right? But in our new technological info age, I mean, we're seeing a lot of sort of negative sides to that as well.
Yeah. And athletes in particular, I think, who are used to dealing in close quarters with other humans, working together, physically touching them, moving around, looking them in the eyes, reacting to situations around them, might feel especially alone when they leave that. And so finding a way to scratch that itch, to be connected with people in a task, to find, a source of immediate reassurance or some culminating moment, that's important. And so let's find a way to do that. And I think I have one idea for that. And I think we're already on to that.
Let's see it.
And the answer is cannabis.
Oh!
And that's how we met, Eben. Well, no, we met before that, but we have that in common. Everyone in this room, and probably most of the people listening right now, have that cannabis in common. And
cannabis
actually,
tribe, yeah.
That's right. And everybody who is listening right now is probably part of that cannabis tribe.
Yeah.
And so you know what it does for your sense of connectedness to the earth, to your own emotions, perhaps to someone you love, to your ideas.
For sure.
Whatever it might be. It used to be that, the thought was that if you consume cannabis, you're a loser. There's a lot of stereotypes around that. You'll become a couch potato. It'll kill your brain cells. It'll make you stupid. Well, that's not true. And we're learning that that is not true. But what it has taken is people coming out of the woodworks and us understanding the stories of individuals who are excellent at what they did and also consumed cannabis. Starts with sports. Okay, we've talked about that a lot on this show. But there are a lot of other very successful cannabis consumers out there. Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln?
Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
He liked to retire after a long day out onto his porch and smoke the hemp pipe.
The hemp pipe.
Amazing.
Wow. And that man, conceived the plan to unite the North and the South and to end slavery. I mean, these are mental feats of brilliance that were aided by cannabis consumption. And aside from athletes, I believe that it's good for the mind because for me, I was always a little anxious as a child, ADHD, I've talked about that before. And for me, cannabis brought me down and helped me focus. It brought me down to a level. And it helps you connect the dots. I mean, Jed, what does cannabis do for you? But let me give a little background on Jed. Jed's a music producer.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant musical mind. What does it do for you music-wise, Jed?
It shuts everything else out and allows me to focus on the task at hand, which is connecting one note to the previous note, and then figuring out what note's going to happen next.
So it centers you in the moment.
Yeah, puts you into the flow.
Yeah, I mean, the in the moment stuff is very important for people who just, for one reason or another, don't have racing thoughts, intrusive thoughts, interrupting thoughts. Your thoughts are interrupting yourself, and you can tell that when some people talk, like myself or Nate. Eben, you're a slower talker.
Yeah.
But we both will interrupt our own sentences to discuss something else in the middle of a point. That happens. So yeah, cannabis really brought me down, and it started, kind of at a fairly early age. I definitely used in high school, probably a little bit too much. But, still to this day, I enjoy, if I have a long day, I enjoy coming back, smoking, and walking around the house thinking about things. And I have a nice, smooth train of thought, but I enjoy that part of it. And I wanted to say one thing about Abraham Lincoln, because he had a great sense of humor, from cannabis probably.
Right.
When a reporter once called him two-faced, he replied by saying, if I was two-faced, why would I show you this ugly one?
Nice.
So,
touche, Abe.
Well, George Washington.
Well, he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't the first president.
Yeah. George Washington, the first president, of course, sowed the stuff. He grew it.
He grew it.
Of course, he consumed it if he grew it.
Thomas Jefferson smuggled hemp seeds from China into America. Apparently, the story goes that Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, they were U.S. ambassadors living in France.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they'd go around, and those guys were kind of party guys. They enjoyed
they were
themselves.
Playboys, yeah.
They enjoyed themselves a little bit, and they
just
spend
like
a lot of time,
just like our current president,
in these hashish dens and hashish parlors. And they were like, "My God, this is amazing! This stuff that these people are doing." So they got the idea to bring this stuff back to America.
Yeah, I think it was a big part of the Enlightenment era, which is occurring at the end of the 1700s and, really established in the 1800s.
Absolutely.
Like freedom of thought, all that stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big thing that you really honed in on, Nate, is the effect cannabis has on expansive thinking, opening our minds, blasting through the borders of conventional ideas and being able to think outside the box, be able to think about how do you establish a new country?
Yeah.
What are the types of ideas and what's the moral foundation and fabric of this new place we want to establish? And those guys were doing that, consuming cannabis and, doing a lot of thinking, a lot of high level thinking and strategizing on what this place was going to look like.
Yeah, and I think the cannabis makes you empathetic and allows you to see things from different angles. And those guys needed to see things from different angles to conceive of what was going to happen.
Right.
The Constitution is a very it's a brilliant document that looked at things from a lot of different angles and set our government up in a way that was had to be aided by a little consumption.
Yeah, it's almost you could say it's idealistic. It's ridiculously idealistic for the time to think that we're going to give all these freedoms to all these people and it's not going to be total chaos.
Right.
That's definitely high thinking where you're like, let's do something crazy.
Yeah.
And now we have to figure out how to make it all work.
Yeah.
This is going to work, guys.
This is going to work.
It's going to work.
Well, not only were our politicians, not even politicians, but were our founding fathers involved in that, but William Shakespeare is said to have been a cannabis consumer. When they kind of explored his old house and stuff, they found some pipes in the backyard with cannabis resin.
That makes total sense.
Did his mom show up? He had to throw the pipes out in the backyard?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. Carl Sagan.
Sagan.
Astrophysicist, big stoner.
Brilliant mind.
Brilliant mind.
I just watched a fantastic documentary about that. It's called The Farthest, and it's the story of the Voyager. So they sent up 2 rockets, one of them containing this disc, the golden record, which has basically a greetings from people of Earth to other life forms, other intelligent life that this thing might meet out in space. From 1977, it was shot off, hit every planet on the way out, and has just recently reached the point where sun particles are no longer reaching. So it's gone outside of our solar system and is still traveling at about 30,000 miles an hour.
Who knows? Who knows how fast it's going?
I mean, unbelievable. And it's really it's how we've got the initial pictures of what all the different planets look like and all our information of what we still use today.
Yeah, I wonder how when they were determining, like, how do we send a universal message to the life forms?
It's pretty amazing.
It's like you got to be high to come up with some of those ideas because you got to be like, the empathy. You need the empathy to realize, like, well, what would another being recognize?
Right.
Like light?
They've got
sound?
They've got hello in
what language?
In like 90 different languages.
But all earthly languages.
Whale, they've got whale and dolphin sounds. Wow. They've got some music. Wow. They've got a wide array of music on there. And then it's got over like 200 images of Earth, of, images of cultural significance. It's pretty fascinating. And and this was, I think it was a pretty enlightened crew who put it together, and they were very much interested in capturing the entire vision of the human race, so it's not just, an American hello. It's very much a worldly human hello.
A human hello.
A human hello.
I like that.
Guys.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa. Well,
hola.
Alexander Dumas, that writer. Three Musketeers. Count of Monte Cristo, big stoner, apparently. Michael Phelps.
Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
The best
the greatest
swimmer.
Olympians of all time.
Of all time by far. The fastest human in the water ever. Likes taking bong loads.
I mean,
he's got the lungs for it.
You weren't shocked when you saw that stuff.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely not.
It's a great recovery aid.
Yeah. What I was shocked about was that, United States Swimming suspended him for having a photo of him with a bong. After all that he has done for our country and for United States Swimming, it's like, I think that was just like disrespectful, man.
Well,
but I guess I get it. I get it. But Michael Phelps is one of the greatest athletes of all time.
Here, one of our favorite stoners of all time. A little quote. I have always loved marijuana. It has been a source of joy and comfort to me for many years, and I still think of it as a basic staple of life. Along with beer and ice and grapefruits, and millions of Americans agree with me. Hunter S. Thompson.
Nice. Yeah, Hunter was on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he was on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we can attribute his mental gymnastics to cannabis alone. But,
however, it didn't inhibit that level of thinking.
No, it didn't at all. And how about this one? Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Boom.
Bodybuilder, and he was consuming to recover from his really intense, crazy weightlifting workouts.
Famously seen on Pumping Iron after his Mr. Olympia victory.
Smoking a joint.
Wow.
Arnold is numero uno, baby.
Mr. Universe. Yeah.
And then, of course, lots of musicians that we could cite that have been
artists.
Artists. But probably the most unifying music ever recorded, Bob Marley's stuff, was heavily influenced by cannabis and cannabis culture, specific to Rastafarians, preaching love, peace, acceptance, and the herb.
Yeah, togetherness.
Yeah.
He believed herb is the healing of a nation, alcohol is the destruction.
I mean, that's very true. I mean, alcohol is extremely destructive in comparison, and it is odd that we've gone down the road we did. And maybe we
well,
could
it's
talk.
all money. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I mean, probably another show would be good to look at the switch, because we're talking about guys in the 1800s and 1700s. It's still fairly like positive kind of thing.
Yeah.
And my guy, William Brooke, I love this name.
it's a good name.
O'Shaughnessy.
Okay.
Was an English, or actually probably Irish doctor who went to India and came back, and he was one of the first guys to really start studying the effects of cannabis medically.
Interesting.
And he first found it was an anticonvulsant for people who had tetanus. They used it, and it stopped people from seizing up.
Right.
And I mean, it's very interesting, because this guy is also
fascinating.
not just a stoner and a cannabis advocate, but he had a bunch of inventions. Essentially, he came up with the idea of wrapping a third wire around your telegraph wires to protect it from lightning strikes and to ground it, essentially a little shielding.
Oh, wow.
So he made huge strides in the technology of telegraphs back then. And yeah, so at some point in one of our shows, we should look at the turning point when it was like, here's cannabis. It's like an herbal remedy from, definitely from the East. I think that's probably where we got it.
Yeah.
It's not
earliest findings in China and from around 10,000 BC.
Yeah. And it spreads everywhere, goes into the Middle East. You have the Hashishans, who are the secret society of assassins who used hashish as part of their ceremonies.
Amazing.
In the 10th century. I mean, and then goes on and on.
Goes
man.
on. I mean,
So,
it was
yeah,
a staple in American pharmacopoeia up until about 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act.
We should look.
Put
Because
forth by
it doesn't.
Hearst.
Hearst.
Harry Anslinger and William Randolph Hearst. William had a number of paper trees. He obviously was a media mogul of the time, very connected politically as well. Had thousands of acres of trees that he used for paper to create his newspapers. So he would take a hit in his pocket. At the same time, Henry Ford was building the first Model T, which he constructed out of hemp fiber plates, which were stronger, lighter, more resilient than steel. And meanwhile, coinciding with that, you've got the DuPonts, all, making tons of money off steel and
Fabrics.
They had a connection to Andrew Carnegie and, were very upset about the spreading of hemp as industrial uses for the fibers, because it was very strong to use to make everything from car parts to rope and sails and housewares and clothing. And so they put forth the Marijuana Tax Act, said Mexicans and African Americans were smoking weed, going crazy, raping white women in the streets, and, it was turned into this demonic substance that had no place in American homes and American life. So that was essentially the beginning of it. Very cool action against that was Fiorello LaGuardia, one of the original early mayors of New York City. He fought it, and there's a whole thing called the LaGuardia Report. Right after the Marijuana Tax Act came out, you can imagine the mayor of New York City at the time, LaGuardia, he's got about 300 hashish dens operating in New York. So he's got 300 pissed off business owners who are coming knocking on his door saying, what's the deal with making this stuff illegal? We've been doing fine, no issues whatsoever. So he puts together a whole medical board of doctors to study cannabis and the effects on it on individuals, found literally nothing wrong with it, and took that to court. Didn't make the impact that he wanted to, but I think it's interesting that he was already fighting that then.
So
it's technically it's a very recent development in Western society. It sounds like
politics is what it is, right? The politics of industry and money and all that, and we are watching a changing of the guard a little bit.
Absolutely.
People are waking up to the scourge of pills, the incarceration rates of drug users who are not threatening society in any way, and the cost that society is incurring because of that. And hey, it's podcasts like this that are helping to turn the tide, and listeners like you who are helping do it.
Absolutely.
Man, I mean, that hour just flew by, guys.
Flew by.
I mean, we could talk for another hour, but we should probably save it.
Yeah, we're gonna cap it. I think that was a really nice, tight dialogue we just had there, guys.
That's right.
We should spend 10 minutes talking about how good it was.
Yeah, let's do that. Just
let's review. Yeah, let's review it and
let's review our favorite parts.
Grade our performances.
Tribalism in America in sports, it's very real.
Yeah.
The idea of being a part of a tribe, having a sense of belonging, of oneness, of togetherness, it's very important for our happiness. However, I think it's important to keep in mind where that trail can lead us astray.
Oh, yeah.
And especially as athletes coming out of our careers in sports and feeling very isolated and alone, it's important to start developing some of these other skills that help you feel fulfilled in everyday life, whether it's meditation or going to a yoga class or getting into some cannabis.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite like, being with some buddies and passing a joint around. That's very integrating. That's very unifying. It's a very unifying experience.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think
some things to think about.
For sure. There's a lot of bad elements of some of the tribal warfare that happens in this country, whether it's sports or gangs or politics or whatever. But I can tell you one of the tribes that seems to be A-OK is the cannabis tribe.
Yeah.
And with that one, hey, people of the cannabis tribe, we'll see you next week on The Mindful Warrior.
Can we do?
Wait, should we give us
just do our plugs? Do our plugs.
Sorry. Should I just try that part again?
Check us out on iTunes, guys. Subscribe at the Mindful Warrior Podcast. Rate it, review it, share it with a friend. We'd appreciate it greatly. We're also available on Stitcher and TuneIn if you're not into iTunes. Our website, mindfulwarriorpodcast.com. You can find all our episodes, some great content, and give us a like. Give us a...
Yeah, shout us out on Twitter.
Shout us out on Twitter at
MindfulPod.
MindfulPod.
And Instagram.
Instagram is Mindful Warrior Podcast. And our Facebook page, the Mindful Warrior Podcast.
Yeah.
Or if you really want to get in touch with us, go outside in the backyard and howl to the moon. This has been the Mindful Warrior Podcast. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Mindful Warrior Podcast, brought to you by Athletes for Care, a health and wellness resource for athletes of all ages. Don't miss out on Nate's books, Slow Getting Up and Fantasy Man,